I was here from 1990 to 93, having taken 2 years out between school and university and spent most of them riding in races. So the first deal I had to do with my director of studies, and I write about this in my Animals and Other Family, which Newnham comes out of terribly well, rather better than my school, by the way. Slightly frightened now to ever go back to my school, but I'm very happy being here. But I went to see Mrs. Gooder, and on the first, you probably had this, the first Wednesday or Thursday of the very first week that you were here, you have to do all your meetings. You have to, meet the people who are basically going to shape your life and certainly your degree. And I said, look, I can't do those meetings on Wednesday, or can I get out of them? And she said, why? This better be good. And I said, well, I need to go and ride in a race at Chepstow. And I'm pretty certain that no Newnham student had ever said that before. And she said, why? Explain this to me. And I said, well, if I win this race at Chepstow, I will become the champion lady amateur of the year, and I'll win my weight in champagne, and I will make sure I mention Newnham College a lot, I promise you. And she said, fine, the two parts to this deal. One, you will mention Newnham if you win the race, and you'll mention it if you lose as well, but you will mention Newnham. And the second part of it is, if you can explain to me the one page of the newspaper that I don't understand, and that makes me feel a bit stupid, if by the end of your 3 years you can explain to me the racing page, then yes, you can go. So I won the race, I got my weight in champagne, I mentioned Newnham a lot, and Jean and Richard Gooder came and stayed at Kingsclear at my parents' and took them around the yard and took them racing at Newbury and probably introduced them to gambling, which is a good thing. But they loved it, and that was my, sort of introduction to Newnham, that it could be so flexible as to allow you to keep growing as a human being, that it wasn't always you will abide by the rules that we have set and you will do things when we've told you you will do them. And I think it's one of its great gifts probably to both of us is letting you be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I didn't row at all, and when I started here I hadn't rowed at school, and I did my novice term, my first term of Newnham, and just like many students, it was just part of my experience for the first 2 years. But at the point at which I started to take it seriously, Newnham was just wonderful about it and excited about it for me and positive. And, there must be hundreds of students in Cambridge who say, I want to go and be a rower and do that. And there was, I never felt that it was a problem because, as Claire said, I was growing as a human being, I was exploring, and, maybe it would work and maybe it wouldn't, but there was never any sense that it was the wrong thing to do.
And it was so much fun. I mean, I rode as a novice here at the NCBC, and I still have my hooded top, and I'm really quite proud of it. And it's lovely. It's black with gold writing, which you said yours isn't.
No.
Why not?
Well, I was in charge of the kit.
That's really cool. Black and gold was good. Oh, what was yours then?
Well, I ordered these hoodies they were navy with silver NCBC, and I was promised it was going to be embroidered like a nice sort of Gap top or something like that, and it came printed. And one of my fears in life, which I've never quite conquered, is complaining in shops. And so I was just completely quiet about the whole thing and meekly gave out these hoodies to everyone that I promised would be embroidered, and apologised and just left it.
Did anyone else complain on your behalf?
They complained to me, and I just felt terribly guilty about the whole thing. But nowadays I'd like to think that I'd send them back.
Let's talk, Anna, about your confidence issues. It's very, Anna and I did something with Catherine Granger the other day, which was the two of them talking about their Olympic triumph. And I was really fascinated by your sort of mental balance in the boat between your role and Catherine's role. And just explain a bit about this, because I think this is the key to a good working relationship. It's probably the key to just a good relationship as well.
Yeah, I often say that I have a wife and a husband. So I spent, over the last 3 years, far more time with Catherine than I do with Ollie, who's sitting at the front here.
He's listening rather intently, thinking, right, now I'm going to find out what she's been doing. Yes.
Catherine is an incredibly passionate, dynamic, and highly motivated person. And, I'm sure that those of you who've seen her on the TV, that comes across really strongly. And that is how she is, in the person, in the flesh as well. She's been the sort of natural leader of our squad for a long time, and when I very first came into the squad, she was already in that position. But for the two of us, we raced in separate crews in Beijing, and my crew, I was rowing in the double scull, which was the same event that I raced in London, with a different partner called Elise Laverick. And the two of us, we managed to produce a crew that was technically very proficient. The way that we moved the boat, the way that we communicated with each other, I think we really hit the top notch. And we sat on the start line and we had no idea what to expect. And we ended up in this incredibly tight finish where there were 6 inches separating bronze, silver and gold. And we got the bronze. And it was a shock to us because we thought we might snatch a medal, but we didn't think that we could possibly be so close to the gold medal. And it was a huge confidence boost to me. It was the point at which I started to think of myself as a proper athlete rather than somebody who was trying to make their way as an athlete. And it brought home to me just how much I needed to believe, because if one thing could have made a difference in that race, it would have been believing that we were good enough to do it. And we just didn't. We just didn't think we were a gold medal crew. And it was a wasted opportunity. And I think for Catherine, it was a little different. There were 4 people in that boat and they all believed that they could win it. And there were hints that it maybe wasn't quite right. And certainly from a technical point of view, Elise and I were training alongside them and we could see that there was the odd thing, but they had so much passion. Everybody thought that would see them through and they would be fine. And when they didn't win and everybody was so upset and all the 4 of them were all devastated, it took Catherine a long, long time to get over. But when the 2 of us started rowing together, we realised that actually we were the other halves of each other's jigsaw. And the 2 things together, one person, I'm the planner in the boat and I take care of the question, which is, every day in the morning we have to wake up and know exactly what our goal is for the day. What are we trying to improve in this session? How we're going to do it? And it's my job to do all the talking in the boat. So through each training session, through each race, sort of the tactical calls and, all of that communication is my job. But Catherine makes it seem possible. She makes us believe that we can be the best in the world. And one of those, we both know one of those things on its own, it isn't good enough to be a world-beating crew, but together, we haven't been beaten. And
the amazing thing is when they go away and they're training, they are doing everything together. They are sharing a room, they're doing the washing, they're cooking, they're eating together, they're going through quite painful training sessions, and you don't even get on each other's nerves. And I find that staggering because, God, I get annoyed by loads of things. But you also, you fulfill your own roles very happily. It's not like you look at Catherine and think, oh, I wish I was like her, or she looks at you and thinks, I wish I was like you. You just feel, you are the positive to the other's negative and vice versa. And it really, really works.
Yeah, it's really important to be comfortable with our roles. I mean, Catherine had a lot of exposure going into the Olympics and I had to be absolutely comfortable with that. And it was the natural way around. Had we chosen, it would have been Catherine that we put forward because she's more comfortable and more, I don't know, she communicates her passion so well. That's so positive for women's rowing and women's sport in general. Absolutely, women's rowing deserves a role model as Steve Redgrave has been for the men. Catherine's a natural person to do that. And I know that we're completely dependent on each other, and when we get the opportunity, we can tell the bigger story, the more in-depth story. But it's her story is very powerful, so it's the obvious one to be the obvious story. And for me, I don't need that. Yeah. I don't need that publicity. So
actually it's fine.
So actually,
you're never going to resent her getting a lot of the attention.
No,
it's just fine.
Yeah, because that's how we would choose to have it. Yeah. And I know that to get the result, to get the gold medal, the best person that I could be was the other half of her jigsaw. And if I'd have tried to overlap and be in her domain, it wouldn't have worked. And so it was, Ollie was very good with this. Keep your eyes on the prize. Don't get distracted by stories that other people are trying to tell and, filters that are being put on the whole thing. It's all about whatever it takes to make the partnership work and, to make sure that each other are all right all the time. And it's very like a marriage. We just, you have to be very sensitive to how the other person is coping on a day-to-day, minute-to-minute basis and make sure that you're giving each other the best environment at all times.
And it's interesting as well that listening to you now and knowing how much you've achieved and seeing you, and Ollie obviously seeing this for a while, who do you think, this isn't stealing your question because it's such a good question, she should never have told me. And it is a great question, but it's her question, which is, who do you think you were when you arrived here? Who were you when you left, and who are you now?
Okay, well, I'll do for me, and then you have to answer for you. When I arrived at Newnham, I had one thing which was the linchpin of my confidence, which was my academic ability. And I think that was because the school that I was at, no disrespect to it, it was a lovely, friendly state school in Staffordshire. It didn't really do anything. It didn't have a special talent, and I wasn't especially musical. I wasn't especially sporty. The netball team would take to the court if they could persuade 7 people to break into a run. And so I was in the netball team, but it didn't really mean anything. And my chance to expand my horizons, to get out of the wider world, was through getting good grades and getting here. But I didn't have any confidence socially, really, unless we were sitting around talking about indie music, which is my comfort zone. I didn't have any confidence in the sporting arena. I had no idea that I would be any good at anything. And I had, formal halls and all that kind of thing were a huge learning curve for me. And I'm still incredibly grateful to Newnham for the transformation. I feel like I caught up, in a sense, to my peers at Newnham who were a little more worldly, and it just took me out of being a small town girl and made me realise that there was a world of possibilities out there. And
here you are now.
And here we are now, and I've been reading your book, so I know that when you arrived at Newnham, English may have come a close run second to being a champion jockey, but
I think I had exactly the reverse. I had no academic confidence at all. And actually my school, when I said I wanted to try for Cambridge, basically said, yeah, pull the other one. And so I tried first, I tried for Christ's to read law, mainly because I think in a lot of instances, if one of your parents has been to Oxford or Cambridge, you try and do what they did. So I tried for my father's college and I tried for law, which is not what he read, but I thought then I wanted to be a lawyer. And it seemed terribly glamorous. I watched a lot of LA Law. I loved it. I thought, I want to be like them. And you get a slightly false impression. But my A-level results weren't good enough. And I remember getting the letter, obviously confirming my A-level results, and the letter from Cambridge saying, sorry, not good enough, we can't have you. And I went riding for 2 or 3 hours to basically delay the conversation I knew I was going to have with my parents, because I knew my father wouldn't get it, as he still thought I did biology A-level and I hadn't even done biology O-level. It was, him understanding that you needed to have good A-level grades to get in when he got in, because he just caught a book. The world was a different place from when he'd gone to Christ and played rugby and got his blue and not got a degree. But it's a different place now. But I took another year. I applied to Bristol and Exeter, got turned down by them. And the one thing I had in my favour was I was bloody stubborn. And I was really stubborn from about 7 years old. And I was so stubborn when I was 18, 19. I was a year young at school anyway, so I'd left at 17, so 18. I said, right, I'm going to try for Cambridge again, and I'm going to try for English, which is the thing I should have tried for, because it was the only thing I was any good at school. And I had been recommended Newnham by somebody who knew Jean Gooder and said, you have to meet her because she's the most fantastic director of studies, and they are really well known for a good English department, and you will love it there. So I retook my history A-level, got my grade up, still not brilliant grades to try and come to Cambridge, and 2 A's and a C, and certainly not in today's world. That would be, what did you do wrong to get a C in Latin? But so I tried again, and I remember coming here for the interview, and I remember going downstairs to Jean Gooder's beautiful study and looking out in the gardens, and Sue Manning was the sort of number 2, and they kind of did a good cop, bad cop thing with me. But we started talking about a book I was reading at the time, and they said, why do you enjoy it so much? And I hadn't finished it, so I said, please don't tell me the ending, please don't tell me the ending, but I start talking about the book. And you know that scene, and Billy Elliot hadn't been written then, but you know the scene in Billy Elliot where they say to him, and what does dancing do for you? And he starts to say, it's like electricity. It makes me come alive. This sort of a conversation happened, and I just went on one and said, and this, and this, and this, and this is what it makes me feel. And I want to be able to understand this, I want to be able to study this, I want to be able to write this. And they said, fantastic, that's lovely. And almost said, they didn't quite say, we'll see you next term, but it felt like they had. But I knew from one of my interviews before at a university that Dan had turned me down, that walking out the door saying, see you next term is not a good idea. So I didn't do that. But when I got the letter saying you're in, I was so thrilled. And given that I was riding in races and that was all going on, the only thing I had until that stage was I can ride. I can ride, I can ride, I can ride. This is what defines me. This gives me strength. And when I came here, I then had to try and learn a way of becoming a much more interesting person, frankly, because talking about horses can get awfully dull, which is why the book is so much better than that. And I went off, when I first arrived here, I wanted to do everything, so I went to all of those squashes where you get free alcohol, it's fantastic, and met a lot of friends at the cricket squash who were Pembroke boys, and they ended up being my good friends and still are. But I also went to the Union Society, and I got involved in the union, and I started debating there, got on the committee very quickly, and at the end of my second year, which is very rare, I was president of the union. And it slightly happened by accident, and I think all of these things started happening by accident, and it's only now that I realise that the one thing the stubbornness is really helpful, that I'm so stupid, it doesn't ever occur to me that I couldn't do something. So I turn up presenting the Olympics without a second thought of, oh, what am I doing here? Do I really know anything about swimming? To me, it's just like, yeah, fantastic, I'll do swimming. Yeah, great, yeah, I'll learn about that, be fine. And I think, to some extent, getting here and being surrounded by people much, much cleverer than me, you develop a way of, being practical and rational like you are, actually planning. So I get through Olympics and Paralympics better than I used to, because I'm much more sensible about when I sleep, not going out late at night, doing the homework I need to do for the day I need to do it, being never trying to look at it as the whole, because if I look at it as the whole, I'll panic. And there are moments when I do early on and go, I can't do that. But then split it up as you would do with your degree, split it up into parts, split it up into papers, split it up then into subjects within that, or books, or essay titles, or something, of just going, right, I'll do that, and that. And actually writing the book, which I loved doing, and can I just proudly say, in today's Sunday Times bestseller list, and I wish Jean Goodall was here just to be able to show her that she's in France or somewhere, isn't she? Will you show her the page that says, General Non-Fiction, #1, My Animals and Other Family by Clare, and that is today. And actually being able to write that book and deliver it on time was a triumph of the practical me, which hasn't been that developed. I think I was much more like Catherine through most of my, hey, fantastic, let's go, come on, we're going to win this. And I've learnt to have that little bit of you in terms of, right, how is this going to happen? And how can I influence its success, if indeed I can? And so, hopefully, getting there.
So you very kindly gave me a copy of your book earlier on this week, and I've had a little read through. And I'm intrigued. I know you've been quite busy.
It's nothing.
And throughout your growing up, it seemed very important to you to escape with for a long walk or on the back of a horse usually. How have you coped with the roller coaster of the last 6 weeks or so? And through the Olympics, it's been a couple of months for you.
Well, one of the good things the good thing about the Paralympics was Channel 4 very kindly offered to drive me home every night after my programme finished. So I wouldn't get home till about midnight. But as I live in West London, the difference of waking up at home and being able to walk the dog, just to have an hour in the morning where I could be me and not, no makeup on, just in my scruffy dog walking jeans, which are really scruffy. Going to the park, walking down to the river, having natural light. That's really important, and I think sometimes we forget it when we get really busy. That's the bit that goes, and it shouldn't. You should always try and give yourself passive thinking time. Just give yourself time where you're not constant, you're not distracted by too much. So that helped. But we had Alice and I went for a wander around Cambridge yesterday because she'd never been here, and I'd obviously been banging on about how wonderful it was. Never been to Newnham, had been on stage in Cambridge, but hadn't really wandered around. And we had this. We were fine in the smart shops in Jaeger and Reese and wherever else we were, because there's only about 2 people in there when you're in there. But we went into TK Maxx. I need to go to TK Maxx. And that was a mistake. That was a big mistake. And as we were two girls, young girls, came running in the door and went, Jenny! And I didn't know what to do. I was like, I'm not Justin Bieber. You don't react like that. And Alice says, you're a big-age woman who does sports. I was like, thanks. People don't react, certainly not young girls. And I said, no, let's calm down. Can we have a photo? I said, yes, we can, but not in here. We'll go out on the street. But they actually couldn't have a conversation. And I thought that's really odd, because normally people want to have a conversation. They want to talk about the Paralympics, or they want to talk about the Olympics. And I love talking to kids about sport and the new sports they want to try now, whether it's rowing or taekwondo or handball or something they've seen that they really, or my nephew who suddenly wants to do javelin. So Goldie Sayers' mum, last night at Ely Cathedral, gives me a child's javelin. It's brilliant. I know I'm going to be really popular with my brother and sister-in-law. The boys are throwing a javelin in the garden. But that's easy, because I'm talking about something else. When somebody comes up and they're just saying, it's you, what do I say? I don't know. So I'm not really sure how to deal with it, actually. I mean, it was very odd being on Jonathan Ross with Justin Bieber and Liam Neeson and the Killers. And I did sit down.
All that iconic hair.
I know. All of it, yeah. Me and Justin, I know. And I sat next to Justin Bieber, and I remember thinking, gosh, what am I going to talk to you about? I said, so, are you on tour? Where have you been? And poor lad, he's still got jet lag. He said, and he's terribly sweet, very polite, but I did struggle. Liam was fine. We warmed up and we had long chats about, I can't remember what, fly fishing. He tells the story very slowly. He's very nice, he's very wise, but it is a bit weird. I do find it odd. You must find it odd.
Yeah, I think for me it's been, it happened overnight, really. Catherine had a bit of a chance to get used to being known and people being excited to talk to her, but for me, we were so sheltered coming into the racing. We were in our hotel, we were in our routine, and there was a comfort in the routine. Even for the finals day, we knew exactly what we were doing right up until, the last stroke of the race. And then you cross the line and suddenly you don't have a rule book anymore. No one's told you how to behave. No one's told you what to expect. And you couldn't possibly have thought about what to expect. It would have been dangerous. There's no way that you could have tried to prepare. But we were then being, stopped in the street walking, especially around the Olympic Park. And I was terrified that I was not going to be able to go to the supermarket without washing my hair or something. My life as I knew it, I would lose my anonymity. And fortunately, I've realised that there are a lot of clues that you can give to people in context. So I'm absolutely fine if I'm in my normal clothes, but if I go for a jog in sports gear, then that's a clue. And
I've realised I realised this in Cornwall. If I don't speak, I'm fine.
Really?
If I wear a baseball cap and I don't speak, it's all right. But as soon as I start speaking in a shop or something, where's it coming from? Like the radio's on,
Yeah.
And then I think I should just point at the radio.
Yeah. Have signs.
Somebody said to me yesterday, where were we? Edinburgh Willermill. This guy came out and he was staring at me. And then he goes, you look very like Clare Baldwin. You look very, very, do you get that a lot? And I said, I do actually. I said, mainly from my parents. And he didn't understand. I was just laugh, and I know that he stood there going, I must have walked away going, she's very rude. I thought that was a really funny line, but he didn't, And so he's walking away looking at me. And you don't know what to do.
No.
Very odd. But I had two heavies with me. I was doing a book signing in Leadenhall Market in the Waterstones. These two security guys, Waterstones always provide you with security men. They're walking me through Leadenhall Market afterwards. And of course I'm chatting to them because I'm quite embarrassed that I've got two big men in black suits. I say, so what do you normally do, And they say, we've done a lot of work with One Direction and, we need to keep that. I said, to be honest, I don't think you'll have that much problem with me. I said, I need to go and get some lunch. And so we go back up onto the main street, we go down towards Marks and Spencer's, and I said, I'll just nip in here and get a salad. And they go to follow me, and I said, no. Honestly, I am capable of going into M&S and getting my lunch without security. I'll be fine. It's just nuts.
So what's been the most unusual thing?
Oh, that and oh yeah, I had an email. There've been various. The fun thing is, and you must be getting a lot of requests to do stuff, but
well, I think you were probably more so than I. I mean, I've been able to go to lots of schools and events, and it's been wonderful. And I've had to learn really what my job is, what my new job as a sort of Olympic ambassador, I suppose. As I said before, no one prepares you, and when somebody's coming up to you full of excitement because they've watched the Olympics and they just want to have a conversation with you so that they can tell their friends that they've met you, I just had no idea what to give to that person, how to be with that person. Unfortunately, Catherine she's a bit more up and running, so I had a role model to copy off really, and she's just warm with people, and I think that's all you can do. And I'm getting much more comfortable being the centre of attention, but it's not part of our training program.
And it's interesting as well because yes, it's not, and actually, to some extent, it's not part of mine either. But I think you learn, and maybe I've only learnt it now. Having done my 5th Olympic Games, we have enormous power. We have a power because people are listening to us right now. And I was absolutely determined after this London Games not to fall into the trap that maybe I fell into before, of being so frightened of those people who employ me or who might employ me, that I didn't feel that I should say what I needed to say. And now I just think, right, I'm saying it, which is that women's sport does not get enough coverage in the years between Olympic Games. And that actually the Olympics once again and the Paralympics proved there is a mass audience there for general so-called minority sports, because all you need to do is care. You need to care about the competitors, you need to understand the rules of the game, whatever it is, or the rules of the race, and you need to watch it unfold. And there is your live drama right in front of you, and this is why it went right, or this is why it went wrong. But care about the people in the boat, that they have a personality and a face and a story that you know and you understand, and you want them to win. That's all sport needs. It doesn't have to be men's football all the time, every day, on every page. So, and I say men's football very advisedly, because there is a damn good screenplay to be written about women's football in the 1920s, and that might be my next project, and I really want to do it. And the history of women's sport is very interesting and is very interlinked with, with the history of the women's movement and actually the struggle to win the vote and all of that. As soon as women were allowed to play sport, and this is true across other countries now, their clothing had to change, because you cannot play lacrosse in a corset, for example. Very difficult. I've tried. But as soon as you literally and metaphorically loosen the corset, you find that you are allowing women to be strong physically and mentally. And what I really enjoyed about this Olympic Games, and you and Catherine were part of this, was seeing women being openly competitive, determined, having worked damn hard, having muscles, and standing there saying, this is what we're capable of, and still being iconic women, and nobody turning around saying, oh, that's not very feminine. Because there was a whole redefinition of what it was to be a woman, and a whole range, and whether it was Nicola Adams winning a gold medal in boxing, or whether it was somebody, Beth Tweddle doing brilliantly in gymnastics, which would have been obviously regarded as more of a girls' sport. Both things are hugely important, because girls in schools then are going, oh, I can be like that, or I can be like that, or I can be like anything in between. There isn't a rule that I have to look like a skinny little stick walking up and down a catwalk. I don't have to look like that. Oh, great. And I just think the imagery is as powerful as anything that you'll ever say. Just standing in a room and being you is enough for well, I mean, it helps if you can talk, obviously. But we'll give you a code. Yeah, you're quite good at that. I just think it was one of the, I really do think, and I hope it's up to all of us to make sure that somehow we keep that, keep that message going, keep that flame burning, to use the kind of cliche, but actually make this Olympics keep mattering, because it should do. And this, I think, is a big shift, I hope. And I will certainly continue to put pressure where I can, on those that make the decisions as to what is covered, what's talked about in news, in sports bulletins on the radio, what's written about in the papers, and how a list like Sports Personality of the Year, which takes on an importance actually that's far beyond what it should be, but it is bloody important that there are women on that list. And the reason there wasn't last year was, I don't think, a surprise at all. There was no woman on that list, because the editors sitting around in newspapers going, oh, can anyone think of a woman? No, we don't really write about them, do we? No. Any woman done anything this year? No. Oh, let's stick Andy Murray on. Last year. I have no problem with him being on this year. He's won an Olympic gold medal and a Grand Slam title. Last year, he didn't even get to a Grand Slam final. What was he doing on the list? He wouldn't have wanted to be on the list. He was on the list because they write about him. They know who he is. And they didn't know anyone who'd done anything else. And it just... Anyway.
I think what seems to be changing to me is that, as you say, women's sport is grabbing the attention across the board. And I think what women's sports tried to do before is grab the attention of women.
Yes,
and
right. Yeah.
Now it's grabbing the attention of everyone. And there's a couple of incidents that really brought home to me how this is changing. And Catherine and I were sitting in a coffee shop during the Olympics on the morning that after Nicola Adams had won. And there were a couple of very muscular guys doing the coffee, and we overheard them. They were just chatting about the match and how amazing she'd been, and she'd done this and she'd done that and she'd thrown that punch, and just how awesomely cool the whole thing was, and you just wouldn't have expected those guys to be into it. And the other one was I went into a school in Islington earlier on this week, and it's a very sort of mixed intake school, and we were doing they were getting there on their rowing machines, and they're sort of 14, 15-year-old boys, and they're way too cool for the whole thing, and they're just sitting there, muttering and and then you bring out a gold medal, and all of a sudden the whole thing drops away. They're 8 years old again. They're really excited, and they come rushing over full of questions, and you expect it to get the girls, but to get the boys as well, that makes it mean more for the girls as well, because everybody, it's not...
I love it as well when I get little boys coming up. I mean, I like it when I get little girls coming up saying, I want to do your job, but you're right, when little boys come up and say, I want to do what you do, you know that they're not saying it just because they're not saying it because they see you and think, oh, well, I can do that too. They're seeing it because they're saying, you clearly love it.
Yeah.
You're getting so much joy from it. I want to feel like that.
Yeah, that's when you've crossed the barrier of it being a gender-related thing.
Exactly. And that's, and there will be opportunities. I'm involved in a project that will, I think one of the things women's sport has lacked is consistent information. And going back to that whole practical, rational, and emotional thing, the practical framework hasn't been there for women's sport. There isn't even a holding website where all of the news comes in. And journalists are fairly lazy. And I know I've sat there and I've written sports desks every half hour. And the stuff that you get through on the PA wires is what you tend to then fill your sports desk with. And 9 out of 10 of those stories are about men's football. So away you go. You write whatever's there. And so rare is it that any line ever came in about women's sports. So you had to actively find it. And most of them won't or don't have time. So I'm saying to them, look, why don't you make it an absolute, on 5 Live, as that is the main feed, and those sports desks, once they're written, then go off to all the other networks and all the local radio stations, and generally speaking are picked up and just read out verbatim. Why don't you insist that there is a story on women's sport every day? Because as far as the world is concerned, you won't do anything again until Rio. You'll just be eating food. As far as they're concerned, wrapping Christmas presents or whatever. It's like, and always around Christmas when there's nothing happening, there's never a story about women. And I always think, what do they think that female athletes are doing right now? Wrapping presents and cooking dinner, obviously, and that's not newsworthy. And it's not true. That's not what they're still training. They're training every day. They're still planning for whatever the next big competition is. And it'll happen. It will happen. And it'll either happen or I'll get fired.